Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Cricket Unfiltered. I am Menners and have a special guest today, one of the legends of Australian cricket, and he's now released a new book called Top Knocks. He's also a commentator for Channel 7. Brad Hodge, welcome to Cricket Unfiltered. How you doing?
Yeah, Menace. Yeah, thanks for having me. Nice intro. I'm pretty good actually.
Nice. I'm not joking. I was told a couple of people you were coming on the show. They were Victorians, and they said Brad Hodge is my favourite cricketer. So I'm
Yeah,
sure
it's
the
nice.
listeners are. Yeah, it's great to have you on. I actually used to listen to Flemo's podcast, The Bowlology Report, a lot,
Yeah,
and you did a lot of episodes with him early on. So you're quite au fait with the podcasting scene.
yeah, we did. It was pretty cool actually. It was a bit of a backyard act out of Flemo's house, and I guess it sort of stalled a little bit because of, I suppose, the geographical challenges of committing to getting over there to his house every week. Um, your life can sometimes turn busy, and we did it sort of. It was fun actually. It was really cool, and I thought it was enjoyable. And we probably wanted to take it a little bit further, but it just sort of stalled, unfortunately.
Do you feel it helped your broadcasting? Because I think podcasting is a great way to just help your media development because you can go on, you can talk for as long as you want, and it's just a good way of practicing.
Yeah, I'd say it would, and it also kept us up to date and up to speed with all current affairs in cricket as well. So you really had to do your homework like during the week to be able to put together the podcast because there was a few things attached to it. It wasn't like we just went in there and started talking about random stuff. There was some background work that went into it, so and some commitment, and that was a positive in that sense because we sort of followed not only cricket in Australia, but we had to cover cricket overseas, cricket in all parts of the world, male and female. So it was good. Did it help in broadcast? I certainly think the more you do um, anything attached to a microphone does make you a little bit better. It's just
Mm,
like batting. You walk out, you mark center. Every time you do, you become a better player. So yeah, I'd have to say I agree with that.
absolutely. Now tell me, I got a copy of your new book, Top Knocks, and it's fantastic. You've basically picked your best 20 knocks in Australian cricket, and in your viewing lifetime. Is that what the criteria was?
Pretty much, yeah. And if you run through, there'll be a number of critics, cast their mind back to knocks in the '70s and stuff. But I mean, realistically, a lot of these ones visually I've seen or had an attachment to. Um, there's a couple that I tried to explore in the archives, and it was difficult. And maybe they should have got in there, maybe they shouldn't. But again, it's my opinion. It's open for interpretation. It's not the Bible by any stretch of the imagination. But I reckon that people will go, "Wow, those knocks are incredible," and they'll always add. Like I could have punched out 30 or 40 or 50, but I don't know. This was the first time I've ever written a book, and I didn't know how time consuming it would actually be. Like there was a lot of hard work that went into it. And in particular, I suppose, like I interviewed every person individually that I could. And there's a couple of players in here who are unfortunately deceased, passed away. So I'd source a friend or someone else who was involved in that game or performance to make comments. So that was time consuming, and then you got to write it up. You got to listen to it again, which is an hour and a half of conversation and dissect it. So it was a lot harder than what I thought. That's to be honest. Yeah.
I mean, a few things there. I guess with you said this was your first book. Was there any thoughts around, writing a book that was a bit more reflective on your own playing career and told a few of the stories from when you were playing? Or why didn't you go down that road?
I've been asked to write an autobiography many times, probably for the last 15 years, I reckon. And the brutal, honest answer is that um, there's a lot of heartache attached to that story, to be honest. I played 6 tests, I played for my country, and that's a great achievement, but the reality is that it fell short by a fair long way in my mind. And there's heartache, there's there's a lot of sense of loneliness as well. So the story in my mind would have been a painful one to write, and it would have, if I had to put it down on paper, and I'm a pretty honest person in that sense, I would have upset a lot of people, I reckon, that I've been close to over the years, or the way they would have interpreted the way that I put it down on paper. You're just never sure how people react. So then that's how it sort of came to this. I said to my management company, who's heckled me for years on years to do it, I said, look, let's turn that around. I don't want it to be about myself. Um, let's do something about others, and that's how I came up with the concept of trying to challenge people's mind around Test match cricket versus one day cricket and T20 cricket. And I think that was the personal attachment, because I'd played all three forms and I was a bit of a pioneer chasing the T20 franchises around the world. So that was the personalized aspect of it. And that's when it went from there. So I wanted to be a good story instead of an autobiography that, will have some real positive chapters, but there'll be some real dark chapters in there as well. And I just didn't want to put that out there.
Yeah, wow, that's really revealing. I was thinking about this. I mean, I heard you on Howie's podcast a while ago talk about your career, and I sort of thought maybe like why it was, left you feeling the way you feel is because it was so close. You were just so close to that dream of playing, 50, 100 tests for Australia. It's not like, you could almost touch it. You had the baggy green and it
Yeah.
was there. Do you think that's why it's sort of hard in hindsight?
I've dissected this over the last couple of days, actually. It's funny you say that, really hard. And I think there's an inner sense of failure. I don't want to go too deep into the psychological aspects of it, but
You can. It's all right.
it's unfortunately, like, I'm really proud of what I've achieved and what I've done in cricket and what cricket's been able to to give to me. And I tried as hard as I possibly could. I don't think there was anything else that I could have done above and beyond what I did. And to be able to fall short of expectations, I think that's really hard to wrestle with. And I think I've tried to deal with it over a long period of time, and it probably will never go. And I guess that's where gratitude comes into it. And I really have to, wrestle and be grateful of playing with the likes of the people behind me on these shirts, Gilchrist and Haydos and stuff like that. And the side that I actually debuted in got read out to me yesterday. Incredible side filled with legends of the game. So I'm really grateful to be able to get in there and play with that team. But reality is that I wanted it to last for longer, and it just didn't. I think the hardest thing is that probably it was out of my hands, or I felt that I did enough to secure that position, and go on and do something even greater. But yeah, that didn't turn out that way. But look, that's life. Most people have those things that come up in life, and I don't want to sound too down. Playing for your country is amazing, traveling around the world, and like there's a huge element of joy there. But yeah, when you fall short of your dreams, it does hurt. It kicks you in the teeth pretty hard. So that's reality.
Mm. I mean, it sounds like you're still wrestling with it and still going to wrestle with it to come to some peace with it.
Yeah, maybe, maybe. But look, that's it. Look, the joy for me is that luckily enough, I actually achieved my goal, like a dream. Like, there's
Mm.
not a lot of people set out to achieve a dream, and it's either too difficult or there's too many barriers there. Like, I broke down those barriers and skillfully was good enough to get a baggy green cap and played 6 Test matches for my country. Like, it's amazing.
Yeah,
Um,
and fantastic
but
limited overs career.
Yeah, but everyone's asked me about this book over the last period of time. Why didn't you write the autobiography just in the last week? And it sort of brought back those emotions as to, why I didn't do it. Well, the reality is that it would be a book in my mind of somewhat failure. And I just didn't want to bring that to paper. So
Well, objectively, it's not a book about failure, Brad. From someone
no,
on the
I mean
outside.
an autobiography. Yeah, if I
No, no,
wrote
but
an
I, but I
autobiography.
know, no, no, I know that's what I mean. And if it's not about, I'm telling you, it wouldn't be. But that's your perception of it.
Yeah.
Um, well, look, you got a lot closer. I've told this story before, but I faced Brett Lee in the nets. He was 17, and it was a Allen Border Oval in Mossman, and I turned up early, and him and Tomo were bowling to
Yeah.
me, and Tomo was coaching Binger. And at
Yeah.
that moment, I realized I'm never going to play for Australia. And not being able to get on the front foot to Brett Lee, so
No.
I had a realization that my dream was shattered. But
You
interesting.
know what, Menace? Don't take
What?
it to heart. I don't think many people got on the front foot to Brett Lee in all their lifetime, so it's not a big deal.
Oh dear. I heard the late Dean Jones talking about his test axing, which was, w- w- I think a lot of people feel it was unjust, and he deserved more of a shot at test level. And he rationalised it by saying, and you probably heard him say this, that after he was dropped, the team just went on to win everything. So I can be upset that I wasn't picked, but in the end, the selectors kind of got it right, um, which I found was an interesting way to look at it and a way of kind of dealing with it.
Interesting. I've never heard Dino say that actually. Spent a lot of time with him. I can't remember him ever saying that. In fact, we didn't talk about the end of his career at all. He was such a mentor to teach me about cricket in the moment, and that was sort of we never dwelled on his abrupt end of playing for Australia. That's a pretty good quality actually when you break it down. His sort of purpose and role changed, I suppose, to mentor me to become the player that I became. And we had a pretty strong and very good bond and friendship. He was my roommate for the first couple of years playing
Wow.
for Victoria, and we just talk cricket and dissect it all day and all night, trying to work out what the opposition was, how we can beat them, what are our strengths, and really cool stuff. So yeah, he didn't reflect on the end that much at all. And look, to be honest, neither have I. It's just one of those own personal feelings that I'm opening up about this week because people have asked me why this book and not an autobiography because
Mhm.
realistically a lot of people are fascinated with the story. Like it is an interesting story, but hey, it's whether I want to tell it or not. That's the thing. That's the bottom line.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I have heard you talk about it, and you talked to Howie about how you didn't feel the coaching staff were that welcoming on the 2007 World Cup and things like that. So you're right. Once you start to dig into those things, you sort of is it really worth it?
Well, you're going to upset someone, aren't you?
Mm.
So I look back on that experience, and again, it was an amazing experience, but there was so much loneliness in that as well. When I look back and break it down, there's 10 weeks of like real loneliness, and then people struggle to understand that, but that's just how it was. The attachment to the team was at training, and that's probably about it. So, um, a number of players had their partners on that trip. There was three of us that I think didn't. That was Haddon, myself, and Sean Tate. And yeah, we was so isolated and felt left out. Yet, yeah, as I mentioned, the coaching staff. Yeah, I mean, you always have your priority on your number ones, don't you? That's who's going to get you the chocolates at the end of the day. But the more I've gone into coaching and the more I've understood teams, is that you've got to be well aware that the baggage handler is just as much important as the dude that goes and opens the batting for your team. So there's so many cogs in the wheel of success, and as a leader, as you need to be aware of that.
Well, that's been a huge shift, I think, in team environments, and you would have seen it with all your commentary work, where the coaches and squads are a lot better at including everybody in the team and making sure that if you're the 15th or 16th player, you're not feeling lonely and feeling left out. And I think since George Bailey's taken over and Andrew McDonald, they've really tried to make sure players on the periphery communicated well to and don't have those feelings. So I think there's been a big shift since your day.
Oh, 100%. And I've just recently done some coaching in that environment with
Yeah.
Andrew and George. Went to the World Cup in the West Indies, and unfortunately, a couple of catches cost us big style. And that can happen. And then previous to that, in South Africa, leading into the World Cup, and there has been a huge shift. Like it's just so evident that Andrew and George and the rest of the coaching staff have a real attachment and understanding of the whole crew,
Mm.
not just the players, but the staff. You know, there's psychologists, there's physios, there's everyone in that team under that banner has um, a huge love and affection from Andrew and the playing group and everyone involved. It's clear as day. It is really impressive.
Yes, most certainly. And so let's get into this book, because
Yeah.
early on in the podcast, it was a huge debate, and in fact, we toyed with trying to make an algorithm up of trying to define the value of runs. So obviously, you know,
Mm.
third innings declaration on a flat deck, someone peels off some runs. It's not quite the same as maybe in the first morning of a test match on a green top.
Yeah.
So how did you try and grapple with sort of valuing innings?
Exactly what you talked about there. There was sort of a list of criteria that had to be met, and it came down to a number of things: quality of competition, was it on home soil or away soil? Was it a challenging wicket or challenging conditions? Did it result in a winning performance? Did it result in a winning World Cup or series? So there was a number of things that sort of went into that to try and break it down. And then, so that was the sort of test match side. Then I had to break it down to, well, is one day cricket harder than test match cricket? And in my opinion, it's no. Like test match cricket does have a level of skill that's harder than one day cricket. But then I went to T20 and then went, well, T20 skills probably higher than one day cricket and probably equal to test match cricket, depending on circumstances. So it was the criteria was never ending, because I'd pick a player and say I was running through, I don't know, Michael Clark's record. You know, what's he got? 26 test centuries or 30? Who
30,
knows?
30, yeah.
30. And I'm going, well, there's 30. Which one of these 30s can I remember? And then I have to dissect the rest of them, then dissect the opposition, then dissect whether it was really hard. So, and then I broke it down to sort of 3 performances for each individual, and then sort of went about it like that. The biggest challenge, and this is why it's such a great debate or a great pub chat anyway, is where
Mm.
does test performance run stack up against T20? And then there's one performance in there which it's a Matthew Wade performance. In
41
this,
not out.
yeah, and people will go, well, yeah, it's 41 not out. Get in there. And the reason it's in there is that when I went to Rajasthan Royals, Rahul Dravid was the coach, and I was a top order player, bat 1, 2, or 3 in T20 cricket. And he shifted me down to 6 or 7. And I couldn't grapple with it at the start. I just said to Rahul, come on, mate, you've paid for me to be a top order player. Like you're gonna waste your money down there at 6 or 7. And his rationale was no, Hodge. He said, you're the best player we've got of pace in the side. And you're also probably the most um, academically skilled to be able to manufacture a win when a loss is staring at us. And I couldn't quite get that until I was out waiting there to bat. and I'm watching the top order struggle. We're chasing him down, and the run rate required was gradually climbing from 9 to 10 to 11 to 12 and a half. And I'm sitting there thinking, how the hell am I actually going to win this game? Like it's I don't think it's possible. So then I'd sort of break down. Well, I have to hit that guy for 2 4s and that guy for a 6, and then trying to work it out. Um, so I think I made like 40 off, 15 balls, something similar to what Matty did at the time. And I looked at it and I thought that's probably one of the best innings that I've ever played, for all different types of reasons. And if you look at T20 cricket, batting down the order is far more harder than opening the batting. So where do you go?
Absolutely.
And it's probably the opposite in Test match cricket. Opening the batting is most challenging as you can get. Batting at 5 or 6, yeah, it's a bit of a luxury. It's nice. It's not as hard as opening, but it's the reverse of T20 cricket. So I wanted to bring that into the equation for people to really think about, wow, what's the value of these 40 runs off 15 balls against the best bowlers in the world when victory just looks way out of the realms of
Mm.
possibility. So look, that's why it's
It's
in
like
there. The other thing is that level of skill to be able to do that, and even he said that it's just as equally as good as making a Test century. Like it's the same amount of skill, if not more. So
mm.
that's sort of how it came into it.
It's like clutch hitting in baseball, hitting with the bases loaded. Like it's the moment that you need to stand up. It's either perform or your team's going to lose. And I think that's when I sort of think about value of runs. So weighing up test matches with limited overs run. So that Matthew Wade performance was in the World Cup in 2021 in the semi-final against Pakistan.
Yeah,
Australia go through and they go to win their first T20 World Cup.
that's
Famous
right.
moment in Australian cricket history. So I think when I look at value of runs, I think World Cup runs, whether 50 over or 20 over World Cups, they're the things I remember.
Yeah.
Sure, do I remember Mark Waugh's 170 at the MCG against the Windies? Fine. But
Yeah.
an innings in a World Cup is what really, I guess, stands out for me as a fan.
And they're probably the innings which are in there. So if you have a look at all the one-day innings, I think there's there's Maxwell, there's Gilchrist and Ponting, I think, from memory,
Mm,
and they
World
all
Cup
went.
finals.
Yeah, and then there's another one with Andrew Simons, and they each was an individual performance which allowed Australia to go and win a title. And if those moments didn't happen, like two were in the final, of course, and two were sort of borderline whether Australia would, go on to win. So I'm with you on that. It has to be an attachment to a World Cup, and that was part of the criteria, which I sort of thought about my own performances in batting in one day cricket. And yeah, it's one day cricket. It's hard at the start, but it becomes easier and easier as the day goes on. Test match cricket never becomes easy, and T20 cricket never becomes easy as well. So that's sort of how I sort of manufactured the criteria.
Travis Head said recently, the shorter the format, the tougher it gets for him. So
Amazing, eh?
echoing what you're saying, yeah.
Well, I
But
had to
so,
apologise to Hetty. He didn't make it. I said to him, mate, you're two knocks. The one against in the Test World Championship, the 160, probably would have got in. But I said I'd already finished the book and sent it off. And I said, yeah, 130 or 140 in the World Cup final against India was just one of the most insane knocks I've ever seen, which would have got in. So I said, you're 12 months too late, buddy. So he sort of laughed and he said, "What?" I think he said, "Well, there'll be plenty more to come, so there'll be a second edition if you want one, Hodgie." So there you go.
second edition. You'll need a second edition of the book, exactly. So that's interesting. So I heard you say that Glenn Maxwell's double hundred against Afghanistan, you
Yeah,
put in at the last minute. It was sort of the last one to
yeah.
go into the book. Did you have to make the call to somebody and say you've been dropped?
No, luckily enough, no one actually sort of knew. the order or who'd gone in. But Maxi, when I saw that knock, I did have to ring the publishers and stuff and said, I've got to get this in. Like this is the most remarkable innings I think visually most people have ever seen. So and then I had to wait for Glenn to come home and get his time to meet with him and chat about it and stuff. And so that sort of held the book up a little bit because it had been completed. And and someone asked me, so who did you boot out? But there was sort of at the time, there was like 22 to 23 scenarios. I hadn't quite chosen the final sort of 20 by then. So I was like, I think like there was a couple that were, there was Michael Slater's 150 at Lords, I think was a borderline.
93.
There was Phil Hughes, 100 at Durban, I think, opening the batting. There was a couple of Gilchrist were easily just waiting in the wings. There was plenty to choose from. It was hard to actually dissect in the end, to be honest.
The only one that I really thought should have been in there was Steve Waugh's 120 not out against South Africa in the 99 World Cup in the Super Sixes at Headingley.
Yeah.
That was the only one I probably... Yeah, the Herschel Gibbs one, absolutely.
Yeah.
Because that was do or die. Australia lose that, they go home. And he just carried Australia to the end. I know you've got another Steve Waugh knock in there. But that was probably the one I'm like, oh, I would have put that in. I was there. That was incredible.
I mean, that's the thing. There's a couple in there that I saw live, and I think it just has a huge emotional attachment to it. And you just think, wow, that's just unreal. When I spoke to Tugger about it, he probably had 3 knocks. And he broke it down, actually. I think he'd kick one-day cricket like what we've talked about, well behind Test match cricket. And that's why I didn't get in there for him.
You're right.
We sort of I had 3 knocks. One was this one. One was the knock at Sydney when he got his 100 in the 100
Last
Test.
Another one was,
and then another one was against England. And strange enough,
Old Trafford.
Yeah, that was it. Yeah, and he steered me away from those knocks. Reason being is that he goes, Hodgie, their bowling attack just wasn't of the highest level of what I've faced in other times. So that's where he sort of broke down and he goes, the match in Sydney was just, he said it was perfect. Like I batted beautifully. I didn't miss the middle of the bat. It was that perfect day. But he goes, in my mind, this performance was better for this particular reason, blah, blah, blah. Yeah. And when when you listen to him say it, you just go, shit, yeah, it's not a surprise why you've got that at the top of the tree. So,
well, when you announced this book, and there's one Steve Waugh innings that stands out, the 200 in Jamaica, and that's just Australia climbing Everest. It's everything on the line. We talk about stakes. This is the time Australia ascended to the top on the back of Steve Waugh and his brother who played. There's an innings that could have gone in there. Like people forget how well he batted that day in 95.
Well, Mark Waugh sort of sledged me actually and said, well, that he believes that his knock at the other end was his best. So again, we talked about the different scenarios and I sort of didn't feel, I thought, Mark, we've made a number of unreal performances. Let's steer away from that and keep Steve as the headline in that game. But I don't know how you dissect it as well. He just said he batted so well on that day that he, in his mind, that was the best. And again, for the reasons that the competition was so hard. And Australia just getting pounded by the West Indies for generations. And I think, as Steve pointed out, that was the moment. He'd had enough. He just said, this is it. I'm going to fucking knuckle in here and give it to Slot and see what comes of it. And what a performance.
The knock you've got of Mark Waugh's in your book, his 116 at Port Elizabeth versus South Africa in 1997. That was a fantastic knock, and I think it deserves to be in there. Australia at that time were terrible chasing in
Yeah.
South Africa, crowd getting stuck into them. I remember it was just a very tense chase. The rivalry between the two teams was at its nadir then, and I think Ian Healy hit the winning runs with a 6 over
Yeah.
the onside. Yeah, fantastic. And so, what was it like? I mean, I've fortunate enough, like I've interviewed Steve Waugh and some of these great players and got to talk to them about moments like this. I think it is so much fun when you get to do that. And what was it like for you? Because some of these guys you played with, some of them, were your heroes. I mean, and when you talk about stuff that, like success, everyone obviously is happy to talk about good days at the office. So, what was
Yeah.
that like?
Basically that. I said, "Have you got an hour and a half for your time so I can, tickle your back or your neck for a little bit, so to make you feel good." Look, they were I think the one difference, like, I'm not a journalist or anything like that. I think you'll find that in a lot of the quotations from the people or the players, they probably open up a fraction more emotionally to me than they have talking about it in the past. Only because there's I guess, a friendship or a bond that
Mm.
exist. Whether there's that brotherhood of playing Test cricket for Australia, or everyone around the circuit. It's just there was that friendship, and I guess they probably opened up about how they feel and all that sort of stuff, and probably just let in a little bit more than they would have done in the past. I think that was a critical part of elevating the book to what it is. Like Hads opens up pretty clearly about, and he still kept a lot in reserve, mind you.
For his
But
own book, another one.
probably, yeah, probably. But more so because, as a sports person, you don't want to. You've got this. People have this ideal that you're, this gladiator that's unbreakable, and it's often how you got to be. So, to show how difficult it is to perform when you're under stress with family that have got challenges that are just horrendous, it gets emotional, like really hard. Uh,
Mm.
what was it like interviewing everyone? Yeah, it was really cool actually. I think the most joyous one was Alan Border. Like we just went off on tangents and started talking shit about anything and everything. And I think it went for about 2 hours. And originally, I'd sort of said, "AB, have you got 15 minutes of your time?" So I just need 15 minutes of your time, and we end up talking for about 2 hours. And I've got all the recordings, and you listen back, and yeah, it was just really cool. Because at the time he was having some challenges with the health and things, and I think he really enjoyed it. Like, and most other people did as well. So, as I said, you're talking about performances that they did. It's not anyone else's. It's like, this is your achievement. It's like, it's pretty cool. How do you not want to talk about it? So
Mm.
that's
The
it.
contrast, Alan Border, the man post playing and the captain is remarkable. He's the loveliest, sweetest guy. He's been on this podcast, and I just felt like I was sitting down with a mate having a cold one and chatting about cricket. He was so scary as skipper.
Remarkable. He was scary to play against as well at the back end of his career, and then and then it changed. And then I'd say he coached me once or twice for Australia A, and there was probably two people that it was him and Rod Marsh sort of became. They felt like father figures at the time within cricket. Not that there was a lot of bonding, but
Tough school
the,
back then.
yeah, just the information that they passed on just felt like father figure. So yeah, it was devastating when I heard the passing of Rod in that little period as well. That was so devastating for Australian cricket. It was almost like my father had passed away for a second time. Really weird, because I sort of think that he was the pioneer to elevate me to the player which I became. That was spending 6 months with him at the AIS Academy in Adelaide. It was critical for my development.
I mean, so many players have spoken about the impact he had on their career, and just such a huge loss. And it was a terrible day losing Warney on the same day and Andrew Simons not long after. Just shocker.
Yeah, it wasn't fun, was it? Warney's parents just live around the corner from me, so I see them a fair bit all the time. And Simo's, yeah, it was just devastating. It still is devastating, actually. Yeah, I mean that's cricket fraternity. It hurts. There are three huge, huge people in our game.
Mm.
Yeah, lost.
You mentioned Simo, so he's won 43 against Pakistan in 2003. He's in the book, and you talk about impact on a World Cup. Australia lose Shane Warne the night before in disarray. Like,
Yeah,
oh god, our World Cup's out the door now, and then he just peels off this 100 when Australia's in trouble against Pakistan, and I don't think the team lost a game in the tournament. So who did you talk to about that one? Who did you get input from that?
and
Were you there? Were you there for that, or
no,
was
I
it
wasn't there. No, Jimmy Ma. So
right?
I'm good friends with Jimmy. We went to the academy, and he was on the tour. So I rang Jimmy, and it was a really, how did I say it? It was pretty emotional, actually.
Not bad.
Yeah, it was hard. Uh, yeah, it was a good hour that I spent with Jimmy talking about the good, bad, and the ugly of Simo, and the final loss. But then finally we'd bring it back to the performance, and then this a huge smile would come out on Jimmy and start boasting about this performance and how dire things were in the dressing room leading up to the start of the game, and all on the back of this chaos that this war news had created. And it was
And
more the belief, like he said, that the belief in the team had just disappeared. It had gone. And as much as Punter had tried to rally them to believe that it wasn't the case, there was this inner sense that nah, it's not possible. And I spoke to Punter about this as well, and he sort of said that Simo brought that belief back in this knock. And after that game, it was, and that's why it's so critical. The backstory is more important than the actual performance, because it installed in Australian cricket that they can go on and win this World Cup in one individual performance. So the power of that is incredibly huge. And then speaking to AB
absolutely.
about it, yeah, it's remarkable, man. It's funny because AB was selector at the time, and he dropped Steve Waugh for Ponting and Simo. And he sort of said, "Well, shit, who would I like to walk at the crease for 440? It'd be Steve Waugh any day of the week." And he just said, "Look, when Simo walked out, he said I had absolutely no confidence that he would actually perform." So he said I held my breath for about 2 hours, and a sigh of relief at the end of it. So he hadn't had the individual performances or credibility to actually probably even warrant selection, to be honest.
Well,
And
didn't
then
Punter go into bat for him at the selection table and said, "I want Simo in the squad"? I think that's been
yeah,
reported.
I'd say
So
so. Yeah, it must have happened. He was a big supporter of Simo. But yeah, Steve Waugh versus Simons at that point in time, you'd pick Steve Waugh on your life every time. But
mm.
credit to Simo, he nailed this knock. It's as good as any one day performance you'll see outside of a World Cup final. And then actually had a great tournament. Like he nailed it, killed it.
Yeah, that was the start of a very well. He really found his feet at international level.
Yeah.
Great. So great book. Love the fact that you got all these, real yarns about all these innings. What about women's cricket? How did you approach that? And, how did you sort of think about how to integrate it into the book? And do you think like one innings is enough out of the 20?
Uh, it was hard. It was harder than the male. Probably because, like I suppose the reality was that I hadn't seen a lot of like the past performances visually. Like I hadn't seen Belinda Clark's performances or
Mm.
Blackwell's or anything like that, like visually. So it was more that decision's probably more led towards the current crop, which is Healy, Perry Lanning, Mooney, whoever it would be. And then I went through the same process again. Well, it was probably like Perry got that 200, but then it was the flattest wicket in North Sydney, and like the opposition, where did they stand? And then there's another one where it was a toss up between Healy in the end and Meg Lanning. I think Meg got 150. I think it was at Taunton in one of the Ashes games, and that was sort of where I wrestled with. But in the end, it came down to the knock in a final, World Cup final. Got Healy over the line for those reasons that I'd sort of dissected the men as well.
Mm.
That was the criteria, and when you break it down, it's a phenomenal knock. But that was harder to break down, probably because I hadn't had an attachment to the female game, in the past. It's only
It
been a
wasn't
sort of,
even
yeah,
TV.
it's been a sort of a 10-year sort of introduction, and you knew of the great players, you knew what they scored, but there wasn't the aspect of TV. Like, they're on TV every time now, so you can dissect and watch and visually work it out. But you know, by that, it was just going on word of mouth.
Well, at least his runs were against England, weren't they? 170 odd in that final. Did you weight more? Did you weight the runs heavier against England, the old enemy?
Again, it came down to performance. It wasn't exactly the old enemy. It was, well, what's their attack like? Were
Right.
they the best? Were they the best opposition in the world at the time? So it sort of came down to that, and then I do believe that in the female game, England are probably the best competitors. India are there or
Definitely.
thereabouts, but for in home conditions. So yeah, it's just, yeah. Again, it's not that easy. It's there's then I sort of wrestle with Healy's performance in the World Cup T20 final at Melbourne. I think it was 77 in front of like
Mm.
90,000 people, and did that warrant? But it's again, it comes down to opinion. You try and work out what adds value. Um, yeah, there it is.
No, great stuff. Yeah, well, it's a fantastic book. Congratulations. I know you wrote it yourself. No
Yeah.
ghostwriter. No, so
No, no, no Ghost Rider. So
Lawler didn't get the call. Like
nah, no. Look, I'm happy.
Hunter's not writing
Visually,
his own books. Hunter's not
visually, it
writing.
looks good. So I don't know. I read the content like not in book form, like I did it in on my computer and digital, and it was hard to read in that form. I haven't read it, in the hard copy.
Well, now you can get the
Look, it
hard
looks
copy
good.
out.
I don't know what
Yeah.
everyone said it's good, so that's all I can go on. What do you think? Like, how do you break down Test match versus one day cricket and T20 performance? Like, that's the ultimate sort of question, I suppose, behind the book.
Yeah, it's all about stakes for me, and what's at stake. So, for example, I guess, like, okay, good example, Michael Clark. So you've got really famous innings in South Africa that anyone that saw it will know how gutsy it was, and I sort of weigh that up against, say, his 100 at the SCG
Mm,
against India.
yeah,
Like that 100 was incredible. You don't see many 100s, especially not in Australia, and um, but you weigh it up and you think, well, that innings in South Africa, the series was on the line. We were away. The bowling attack was much better, and they almost killed him, but he
yeah.
gutsed his way through it. So I can see how you sort of whittle down performances.
Well, he wanted that 300 in there. He
Oh, there
just
you
thought
go.
that was, yeah, he did. He just said that's the best I've ever batted. And
Pretty
I sort of
incredible.
said, well, I'm going to put this in for this reason. And he couldn't. There was no, as you said, he can't sort of um, like, there's no justification that one's better than the other.
Mm.
Just that one's more runs. But I just remember visually watching that on TV and thought, wow, this is just sheer brutality. This is horrible. And
Yeah,
I
then
think he
bung
broke,
shoulder as
yeah,
well.
yeah, he
Yeah,
broke his collarbone. So yeah, he
yeah,
chipped his
yeah.
collarbone, and things like that. I mean, even his 150 on debut, I was there watching it. Was just as incredible as 300. Yeah, remarkable performance. So, yeah, some of the greats, they've got two or three great innings that they just sort of live on. and remember. And
Mm,
they
Gilly's
yeah,
first Test ton was another one that I sort of thought about as maybe being in there against Pakistan down at Belrive Oval in that famous chase where he partnered with JL. And what I
yeah,
think, why that innings I think is so good is because it was a big chase, I think 370, and at that point Australia was really bad at chasing. And
yeah.
there was part of that sort of 16 game winning streak. It sort of announced Gilchrist at Test level. Like that was very close to his World Cup final innings.
It's close to getting in there.
Good.
The only thing I reckon the wicket just turned. Well, it was a flat wicket by the end of it.
Mm,
It was probably the one thing that steered me away. And then everyone goes, "Oh, what about that knock from Gilchrist?" And I go, "Well, what about Langer at the other end? He got 150." So,
mm.
how do you break that down? Gilly could have had four in there, to be honest. Um, there was a 200 that he made in Johannesburg against South Africa, which was just insane. The 100 off 60
Well, that was
balls.
the innings where he was crying at the end because there'd been some, rumors swirling around about his family, and he was under the pump and
Yeah.
really emotional innings.
Yeah, so he was probably one that probably could have had. There's a couple in there that are in there twice, but he was probably one that could have easily been in there four times,
Mm.
for all the reasons. And again, it's you put that knock in there and you go, well, it sort of kicks out someone else's performance, and you know, um, yeah, it's
No,
just
no, I like it. I like it because you're right. The whole book could have just been like Gilchrist
yeah, and
home
it's
or
interpretation.
border.
So yeah, I was with Gilchrist when he made that 150 in the World Cup final. And again, it's got an emotional attachment because he came in and just embraced me in a hug in the showers. And so again, it's my
Afterwards,
opinion. Yeah, yeah. So it's like that elevates my interpretation of what that meant and how good a performance that was. So there was clearly some self-doubt there about how he was going to perform on the day. And
yeah,
I
definitely.
remember saying to him personally, so before he walked out the bat, um, he sort of hadn't hit his straps the way he wanted it to. And I just said, mate, fucking who cares? Champions just get it done in the final, and this is all you. And 2.5 hours later, he comes off, and I'm mixing the Powerade and that in the showers, getting ready for the team. And he just come in, and he was just full of emotion. He just grabbed me and said, "Dodgeball, fucking how good's that?" And it was just a moment of two sports people just being happy for each other. And yeah, so that's little things like that which alter your opinion or thought. But again, it's up for interpretation. This is just mine. I'm not sure anyone would criticize any of the selections. They'd just keep going, what about this one? What about that one? What about this one? And I did
Mm.
the same. It went forever. I'm like going, shit, what about that one? What about this one? What about that one? And it just was a never ending story.
It's interesting though because even in our discussions, like it's clear there are storied, famous innings in Australian cricket, and as you say, everyone's there or thereabouts. There's whether someone has something a bit higher or a bit lower, or just outside of 20 or just in it, but there are these sort of storied innings that seem to rise above the rest, and it's about context and the story around it, what makes it so magical.
Yeah. Couldn't agree more. That is exactly it. That's the bottom line of what I tried to come down to. Go well. I dissected the knocks and then thought, geez, there's a lot of turmoil and backstories to some of this, which elevate the performance, and it sort of panned out that way. So yeah,
Did you think about putting Gillespie's 200 in there?
no, not at
Okay,
all.
good. So
Only because it would have shattered the likes of Damien Martin and all these people who Dizzy's actually ticked off big style and not want to score them. So
and it
yeah.
wasn't a top knock. Was it like took about two
Um,
days against
well,
the.
it was a top knock. I mean, that's for sure.
It
You
was a good
can't,
time, like in terms of
yeah,
like top 20.
you can't deny it. But then I sort of look and go, well, was the opposition that good, or was it was a flat wicket, and actually it didn't meet the criteria. unfortunately. So
No, you could like it'd be like a bizarre knock, like
yeah, yeah, it's definitely a
seven
bizarre.
seven wonders of the cricket world. Gillespie's 200.
True,
Um,
absolutely.
all right, let's wrap this up. Personal, what's your favorite performance? You know, your top knock.
Uh, there's probably the one which I think stands out for me um, is the Ponting knock at Old Trafford in 2005. I was on that tour, and it was a brutal tour. And this game, after what happened at Birmingham and then come to Old Trafford, the crowd was insane up against Australia, and we were miles behind the game. And England were like an unbelievable bowling unit. Like
Mm.
every time I looked up at the scoreboard, it'd have Harmison 95 miles an hour, Flintoff 96 miles an hour, Jones 93 miles an hour, Hoggard 82 swinging them around. It was just a relentless battery of bowling, and I don't think England will ever come up again, get anywhere close to that again. It was just like the perfect storm. And that 150 or 156, whatever it was, it got Australia down and out, gone losing the test match to about 12 minutes away from winning it. Um, and it was just it was one of the best individual performances I've seen in a heat of battle on a last day, mind you. And it's a fifth day wicket, not a fourth day wicket or third day. It was a fifth day wicket. We don't even see test matches get to 5 days these days. They don't even know what a 5 day wicket's like.
You're
And it
playing
was
golf
just,
on a fifth
yeah.
day.
So visually, I
What about
think again, I was there, so it's got an emotional attachment.
what about? I mean, so what about you as well? Like your own personal performance? You're far too modest. What is your favorite moment as a batter? You know,
For
everyone
me,
200. Yeah, everyone 200. Obviously,
uh,
a test, but
I
I reckon it'd be something else.
I enjoyed the 60 I made in my first test actually. Um, like I'm really proud of that moment. Uh, Again, there was just a lot of build up. Like there's 10 years of emotions to get to that point. 10,000 runs. There's a pile of effort and pile of challenges to get there, and to get there and not get out cheaply was a win. I'm
So who did you
colorblind.
debut against?
Yeah, it was against the West Indies in
Yep.
Hobart, and I'm colorblind. And Hobart visually was the worst place to bat in Australia if you're colorblind. So the bottom has the gum trees just in front of the Derwent, and I could never see the ball. So, to put it in context, and don't take this the wrong way, listeners, but you got the West Indies with dark coloured skin hands, with a red ball, with red river gum trees at the back, and overcast conditions. I was sitting there sweating just thinking about how I'm going to get past the first couple of balls. And anyway, lucky enough, I got 60 and probably would have got 100 actually. Just that I got a shitty decision for what I thought, and most people have said it was from Steve Bucknor on 60, and I was on my way to a ton. But I really felt that I batted beautifully, and it was calm and relaxed, and I just enjoyed it for the moment.
Oh, that's great. I guess if you were colorblind, the pink ball wouldn't have been that much fun either.
Shocking. That's horrible. It really is just a disaster. So I think Chris Rogers stepped out of a test match because he can't see it, and I can vouch for that. You're a walking wicket. It's
Mm.
you might as well not walk out there. So unfortunate for him, but the reality is that you can't pick the ball up. It's just you can't see it. So
You can't see it
yeah,
in the crowd, and I'm not colorblind, and you can't see it.
it's hard. So there's a couple of grounds like the Gabba. If you're fielding at point with the maroon seats, the yellow and the maroon was really a disaster. If someone played a hard cut shot and you just couldn't see it. There was the old red seats at the MCG for the Melbourne Footy Club members. So if it got hit into that, you just couldn't see it. There was a multiple round. Playing in England was a real challenge because their sight screens up until now were horrendous. Now they just sort of blanket out the whole sitting section with
Except
white
the law.
sheeting, white sheeting or black sheeting. But There's a couple of times where I just haven't even seen the ball and whacks into your middle stump, and you just walk off shaking your head, thinking there's nothing you can do about it.
Actually know that feeling. That's one thing I can empathize with you on. Um, well, Hodgie, thanks for coming on the podcast to talk about your book. And I'm not just saying this, but it's a great book, and it's one of those perfect Christmas presents for people, because these are, you sort of, you can read an innings, put it down, pick it up, read another innings, and I love these stories because they're good yarns about Australian cricket. So congratulations. I hope it does really well for you.
Yeah. Oh, look, regardless, I just hope that the publishing company, get their worth. And I didn't do it for financial reasons. I did it because it was an exciting project to sink my teeth into, and I'm glad what it's come out, and I hope people like it. I hope we love cricket. Everyone that loves cricket, I'm sure, will enjoy the read, and have an opinion and interpretation, and that's what it's all about.
Writing is very hard. There's no shortcuts. You just have to chisel away. So I congratulate you on getting it done. And I guess now it's all cricket commentary this season. Is that the plan? Back for 7?
Yeah, it is, Menace. So yeah, I'm doing some coaching with the Australian team against Pakistan in
Right?
November. So Ronnie and his crew have got to prep for the Indian Test series. So there's a bit of a crossover. So I'm going to help out in that space, and then jump into some commentary for some BBL. So yeah, it's going to be a fun summer with India coming out. They're a serious outfit, aren't they? So yeah, I'm looking forward to the whole summer of cricket. It'll be great.
Well, Brad, thanks for joining me on the show. Listeners, thanks for tuning into Cricket Unfiltered. Remember, go out and find a copy of Top Knocks. You won't